Good morning, everyone. Thank you for gathering for our Yom HaShoah Commemoration. Please take a minute to just make sure your cell phones are turned off or silent so that they don't interrupt our service and presentation this morning. And I know that it's darker here than normal. We have the lights off on purpose because of make it easier to see the presentation in a couple of minutes. And we're even going to make it a little bit darker once the presentation begins. The official name for today is Yom HaShoah V'Hagvura, which means Holocaust and Heroism Remembrance Day. This day was established by the Israeli Knesset in 1951, and they were trying to kind of hold two values simultaneously. They both wanted to honor the victims of the Shoah, but they also wanted to honor those who fought back. Because Israelis thought of themselves as new Jews, different than the old world, the Eastern European Jews. They said, we are new Jews, we are not like our ancestors who are at the mercy of the powers that surrounded them. And that's what Jews had to endure in so much trauma. And they said, we are new Jews. We stand up for ourselves and we fight back. Because in Israel, especially in the 1950s, there was this very strongly held belief that so many of their ancestors, their cousins, their relatives in Eastern Europe didn't know what should have been done, and they went like lambs to the slaughter. Today we know that that wasn't true. First, we know it wasn't true because so many of the Jews who were killed had no idea what was happening to them until it was too late. The Nazis, we know, took great pains to hide their true intentions, to deceive people up until the last minute because it made things more orderly and they didn't have to work as hard to kill the Jews. And obviously they took great pains to hide it even after the fact from the rest of the world. And also, as I've been studying the history of Eastern European Jewry in the late 19th and early 20th century, it wasn't unfamiliar for Jews to be told by the powers that be living under the Tsar or some kind of king or prince, you can't live here anymore and we're going to move you and put you on a train. And Jews were often told, you can't be here, and just were moved. And so being told that wasn't a strange thing in terms of Jewish consciousness and history. And we know it's also not true in terms of Jews going off to the camps like lambs to the slaughter, because we know that once the Jews understood what was happening, they fought back. And that's why this is established as Yom HaShoah V'Hagvura, Holocaust and Heroism Remembrance Day, because today it was established on this day by the Knesset as opposed to other dates on the calendar, because this commemorates the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was the few thousand remaining Jews before the ghetto was completely liquidated decided that we're not going to go like lambs to the slaughter and we're going to fight back. We know that when the Nazis first invaded Poland, the professional Polish army collapsed in 26 days. And these few hundred ragtag, already half-starved Jews who had to somehow find munitions, somehow find things to fight back with, held out longer against the Nazis and lasted for an entire month. Now, in the Holocaust, we know that there are all kinds of heroes. Typically, when you say, oh, this person was a hero in the Holocaust, it was some kind of partisan, it was some kind of resistance fighter. But really, every survivor is a hero. Because if you think about it, the amount of physical and mental exertion and strength it took to resist and survive the Nazi onslaught is heroic. Truly heroic. And today, we're going to hear the story of one amazing survivor. So first, the Chazan is going to chant Eli, Eli, the famous poem written by Chana Senesh, and then he's going to chant the Amalei Rachamim prayer, which you have on your sheets, and then together we'll all say the Mourner's Kaddish that was written specifically with the additions of the camps. So first we're going to listen to Eli, Eli.
Eli, Eli, Shelo yigamer לעולם החול והים רשרוש של המים ברק השמיים תפילת האדם החול והים רישרו של המים ברק השמיים תפילות האדם. Oh Lord, my God, we pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the water, the crash of the heavens, the prayers of man, the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayers of man.
If you're able to stand for the Emalai Rachamim, please do. Marla, if you could help me, and there's still some more handouts if people need. If you don't have one, you can just raise your hand. Marla will bring you.
El merachamim shochat mamramim hametzeh menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashechinah b'mahalot kedoshim tohorim כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים לנשמות כל אחינו בני ישראל שנטבחו בשואה, אנשים, נשים וטף שנחנקו ושנשרפו ושנהרגו, שמסרו את נפשם על קידוש השם בגן עדן תחמנחתם. אנא ברחמים אזהירם בזית כנפיך ללמים וצרור בצרור חיים את נשמותיהם. אדוני הוא נחלתם וינוחו בשלום במשכבותיהם ונאמר Amen.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the souls of all our brethren who perished in the Shoah, men, women, and children of the house of Israel who were slaughtered and suffocated and burned to ashes. May their memory endure and inspire deeds of charity and goodness in our lives. May their souls thus be bound up in the bond of life, and may they rest in peace. And we all say, Amen.
Amen.
On the other side, you can join with me in the Mourner's Kaddish for the Shoah. Yitgadal Auschwitz, V'yitgadash Lodz, Shemei Rabbah Ponar, Ve'alma Divra Kirutei Babiyar, Ve'amlich Malchutei Maidanik, V'chayechon Uvyomechon Birkenau, Uvchaye Dechol Beit Yisrael Kovno, Ba'agala Uvizman Kariv Janoshka, Ve'imru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mevorach Leolam Ulmei Maya, Yitbarach Ve'yishtabach Tereisenstadt, ויתפאר ויתרומם בוכנוולד, ויתנשא ויתהדר טרבלינקה, ויתעלה ויתהלל וילנה, שמי דקדושה ברגן בלסן, בריחו לעילה מאטהאוזן, מן כל ברכתה ושירתה דחאו, תושבחתה ונחמתה מינסק, דאמירן בעלמה וורסה, ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו amen. You can be seated. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker. This introduction is maybe a little bit longer than what you're used to in terms of introducing a speaker, but it's all about stories. So, and this is even not the full introduction, but it's a part of a story, and so it's important to know a person's story, to know who they are. Bonnie Ray Meschel, now Vorspan, was born and raised in Oxnard, California, as a very proud first-generation American. Her father, Leonard Meschel, came to the United States from Pinsk, Poland, and her mother, Simi Kamieniecki, did I say that right? Kamieniecka, was born in Czerszów, Poland, and you're going to learn all about her life in a minute. In January 1968, Bonnie saw an advertisement in the Daily Bruin about a performing Israeli folk dance troupe through the UCLA Hillel, and she said, I'm going to give it a try. And she says it was her best decision ever, as David Vorspan was a member of that group, and the rest is history. They were married a little over 3 years later on June 20th, 1971. She graduated from UCLA with a BA in English and from the University of Cincinnati with an MA in early childhood education, as well as a teaching credential for elementary school and grades K through 8. David was ordained as a rabbi, and they came back here to Southern California, where he served in Anaheim and then eventually in Reseda and Woodland Hills, and they settled in Woodland Hills. Bonnie, I like to say, is a very crafty woman, not in the way that you're thinking, but very good at crafting. She has enjoyed creating an ever-growing collection of family heirlooms over the past 54 years through sewing, stitching, crocheting, and embroidery, and she's a past national president of the Pomegranate Guild of Judaic Needlework. She's also a retired preschool teacher and ECEC director, and she loves now volunteering at Kadima Day School teaching Israeli dance to the preschoolers, where Alicia is the director. Bonnie began doing genealogy research in 2010 through Ancestry.com and the Jewish Genealogical Society. Her daughter Alicia put her on the path towards sharing her mom's story when she asked her to make a presentation to the 6th through 8th grades at Kadima Day School in 2023. And it was then that she realized that she needed to continue sharing her mom's survival story for future generations, to know about the struggle, the loss, the survival, and the rebirth that she went through during the Holocaust. Bonnie is the proud and loving mother of Alicia, married to me, Ben, married to Alana, and Shana, married to Aaron, and the proud and loving Bubby to Yael, Gavi, Eitan, Evan, and Judah. And she's blessed to be with, this is what she calls him, her honey, David, for 57 years and married for the past 54 years. It's my pleasure to welcome up Bonnie Vorsman.
Six million Jews were murdered during World War II, including almost all of my mother's family, because they were Jews. My mother survived the death camps before she was freed. As a second generation, a child of a Holocaust survivor, it's becoming my responsibility to continue sharing my mother's story. My brother and I knew her story growing up, but I wanted to get it down on tape. One afternoon in 1990, when she was 68 years old, I sat down and asked her about the details about the Holocaust, about her life in a small town in Poland, and how those most cherished by her were systematically murdered by the Nazis because they were Jews. This happened during the first minute of taping.
All right, why don't you tell us what your name is?
My name is Sylvia Vachol. I was born in Poland
When were you born?
in 1922, August the 15th.
And who were your parents?
My mother's name was Barbara, my father's name was Cole.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
I had three.
Okay. Okay, shall we, well,
No, three brothers and a sister.
And it's going to be a very trying day. And you were the oldest?
The oldest one, yeah. And my three brothers was after me, my sister was the youngest one.
She wanted to keep going. She didn't break down again for the next hour. I want to share with you a few selections from her conversation. I asked most of the questions. You'll briefly hear a few other voices in the background. One is my father, Leonard, her husband, who came to America from Poland before the war in 1932 with his family. The other voice is that of my husband, David, who you will briefly see and hear, and who, wait a minute. You will also briefly see and hear our two daughters, Alicia and Shayna, coming in and out of the room. Let's learn more about her family and her early years.
Where did you live?
In Chelsea,
How big a town was that?
a small town.
Small town. What was your house like?
Oh, we had a beautiful home.
Yeah, what was it like? Was it one story? Was it?
Yeah, one story. We had two bedrooms, a living room, and a kitchen. And next to the kitchen was another extra room. And we had the horses and cows and chickens and everything.
Was it like a farm?
Yeah, it's a small town.
You milk the cows? And,
Yeah, twice a day, in the morning and at night.
and what did you do with the milk?
My mother used to make, we used to have the milk, and my mother used to make cheese and butter.
And was it just enough for your family?
Oh,
Or,
yeah.
did you sell it? I mean,
No.
did you have more? It was just for your family.
Yeah.
How many cows did you have?
One.
One cow?
Mm.
Did you give her a name? Did she have a name? No?
I never told her that.
Oh, there's Alicia. And the chickens gave you
Eggs.
Eggs. Hi.
Hi, Alicia.
Hi. She just woke up from the nap. How old were your brothers and sisters
Oh,
after
that's
you?
between 2 years apart, 8 and 8.
And what were their names?
Shlomi, Meshi, Gidon, Rosa.
And what did your father do?
He was a kosher butcher, and he was also a businessman. He used to buy, food and fish, and used to sell it.
My grandmother was a seamstress, and she had a sewing machine in her home, and she sewed primarily for the non-Jews of Shereshev and surrounding communities. We only have a few pictures of my mother and her parents and grandfather. So this is a picture of my grandmother, Bubble, and she's pregnant with my mom, and that's my grandfather couple. And here my mom is about 6 months old, and she's sitting on her father's lap, and my grandmother's in the background, and sitting next to her is her grandfather, Eliezer, who my mother said was 6 feet tall. Now, my mother was only 4'10" when she was fully grown, so anybody would be very tall, but as you see him sitting there, he seems much taller than his son. This is when my mother was 9 years old, and her grandfather Eliezer had passed away, and you see that there's the tombstone printed in Hebrew, and it is in the Shereshev cemetery. Now, we visited Shereshev a number of years ago, and the cemetery was there, but the tombstones had all been destroyed, suffering from the elements of the weather and also destroyed by the Nazis. There were 2,000 people who lived in Shereshev, 1,000 Jews and 1,000 non-Jews, or Gentiles, which is another word for someone who's not Jewish, and you'll hear my mother use that term of Gentile. This is what the homes in Shereshev in the 1920s looked like before the Holocaust. I'm sorry, that's the cemetery now in 2010. So this is the home. These were built in the early 1900s. And what do you see there that probably wasn't there in the 1920s? Yes, the satellite dish. Very good, very good. And we were also told that all the windows had been replaced, so they were all new windows there. This is actually the street that my mother lived on. And this is something that I haven't done in any of their other presentations. Often Pripachik, Brenta, Feierroll, und in Stub is Hayes. So this is what a Pripachik looks like. Has anybody ever seen a Pripachik before? No, okay. So all the homes in Shereshev have this Pripachik. And the wood went in through here, and this was the stovetop, and they could bake bread, and they could put pots of cholent inside here as well and on top to keep warm through Shabbat. So all the homes had these, and up here, my mother said in the winter when it was really cold, you could go up there, and it was like that was where the heat was. So this was cozy, and then this looks like slightly more modern brickwork there. But this is a Pripachik, and as all of you would know, this is in Yiddish. And Yiddish was a language that was part of the German language that the Eastern European Jews spoke, so that you could sort of understand German when you knew Yiddish as well. Every home had an outhouse. And this is a typical backyard of the homes in Shereshev. And this cart is called a droshke in Yiddish. And this was probably the kind of cart that my grandfather had when he used to take merchandise around to sell it to the community. Here you see a map of Europe. And you can see highlighted in yellow the towns of, so this is my mother's town of Shereshev. My father was born in Pinsk, so this was further down from Shereshev. We're going to hear about Pruzhina in a little while, and we know Warsaw. And this is the map today. The Russians came in and they took, in the late 1940s, after the war, they took over more of Poland. So Pruzhina, Shereshev, and Pinsk are now in Belarus, which is part of Russia. Hitler and the Nazis began in the 1930s in Germany. The Nazis came to Shereshev in 1941, and as my mother is speaking, she doesn't always remember the facts, which is part of PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, that many Holocaust survivors suffered from. My mother's heart raced as the Nazis banged on the door. No one knew what was going to happen.
What happened when the Nazis came in? What do you remember?
When the Nazis came, before it was the Russians came. So they wouldn't let nobody to work. My father and my brothers couldn't work. They had to work for them. My mother wasn't allowed to work, so every time when they used to come and check, she used to hide the sewing machine because she wasn't allowed to sew. not by the Russian. You have to do everything for them, for nothing. So then we were there for a couple of years, and then the German came. When the German came, so it was all finished. They took everything away, and then they...
Tell about the first night, the first time that the Nazis came. Right, the first day,
But when they came, we were hiding in the Wälder.
In the forest.
In the forest.
You knew they were coming? I mean...
Yeah, because that time the Russian ran away, so the Germans came, and then we were hiding, but it didn't last too long because we had to go back to the houses. So then when they came, they started taking out people. They took my father, my two brothers, that they told them to go and look for food, for chickens. So then they were hiding in Bessie's parents' house. And then I was going to look for them, and at night when it was quiet, so they came back home. So when they came back home, so every time when the Germans came, they used to hide underneath the bed, because they took most of them, the men, but the women they wouldn't bother too much. So they used to hide, and my mother, myself, my sister used to be out inside the house and pretend that nobody's there. And we used to have a cow and chickens and everything. They took everything away. Even the food they used to try.
The Germans took it away.
But we weren't there too long, and then one day they told us that we have to come in the morning, and they'll take us someplace. So they took us in a town far away, and the men used to walk separate, and the women they put on trucks. So then we met some men were killed on the way from our town to the next one. But my family were all alive. So when we came to that town, we were there a short time because...
what was the name of the town?
I don't know, I don't remember.
What year was it?
In 19...
let's see.
wasn't it in 1930?
41 is when the Germans came. 41.
So then they let us go. So we decided to go to Pruzhny when labor was there. So we were walking.
Did you take suitcases with you?
No, nothing. No, just a few food to eat, but we didn't have anything.
But before you came to Pruzhny.
So this is the map. Here's Sherashev, and ultimately they're going to end up here in Pruzhny. And the town that my mother couldn't remember was Antipol. So the Nazis from Sherashev took them down to Antipol. My mother had relatives who lived in Antipol, but when they came to their homes, the Jews of Antipol had already been liquidated. There were no Jews left in the town. They spent the night in a home and then proceeded to go east and north and all the way up here, ultimately to get to Pruzhny, where my grandmother's brother lived and where they were able to come to.
What did you think was going on?
We knew that they killing the people. We
That
knew.
they were killing Jews. You knew that.
Yeah. So, so we were there for a couple of years.
In Pruzhny.
Yeah, but then they had a ghetto.
They made the ghetto.
They made a ghetto with a fence. So the Gentiles couldn't come in, but they used to sneak in. And they used to bring us food. And before they took us all out, some of the Gentiles was begging my father and my three brothers that they're going to hide them. But you see, my father, we didn't know that they're going to put us in the gas chamber. So my father didn't want to go. He said, every place the family goes, we'll go together. So that's what happened.
And they couldn't take the whole family. I mean, they couldn't.
No, but you see, my father, my three brothers, they didn't look like they are Jews. When they used to speak very good Vice Russian. But you see, the rest of us, they looked more like they're not Gentiles. But they were ready to hide them, but they didn't want to do it. I wish they would.
There wasn't any attempt to flee the country?
Oh no, they would kill you. A lot of them were killed because they used to go out and when they need the wires, they used to catch them.
From the ghetto.
How about earlier years, as you started to see things getting worse for the Jews?
It was impossible to go places. There was no place to go.
Did you see gradually restrictions against the Jews?
Oh, sure. They put us in one place, all the Jews in one place.
When you were in Shereshev, did you have to wear
Yeah,
a
lots
good,
of, yeah.
yeah. And you had
We had to.
Yeah. And you
Yeah.
had to sew that onto your clothes.
That's right.
Was it a yellow
Yeah,
star?
yeah,
that-
yeah.
And the Gentiles in Shereshev, did they want you to get out? Did they hate you also?
Oh
Were
no,
they?
oh no, not the people that we knew, because my father and my mother used to come to my mother and father all the time. They used to beg him, Even they used to give us, before the war, they used to give us places to grow potatoes. Every year we used to rent a place, and then they used to work for us. And we used to have potatoes for the whole year. Oh, they were very good.
I know that you know what Yud, Jude, means on the yellow star. It meant Jew. Liquidation of the Prizhina ghetto took 4 days. There were 10,000 Jews in the ghetto. 2,500 Jews a day were taken to Auschwitz. My mother and her family were taken from the ghetto on January 31st, 1943, where they had lived for 2 years, from 1941 to 1943. My mother was 18 years old.
And so you lived in Prizhina for 2 years, and then what happened?
Then when they said that they want all the Jews out, so it took them 4 days. We were hiding upstairs. They used to have a little room upstairs. So we were hiding every single day. Then the 4th day, it was impossible to hide, so...
In other words, at first they said, okay, we'll take a whole bunch of Jews to Auschwitz.
So every day they took so much and so much Jews. So it took them 4 days to...
Take all the Jews out of the ghetto.
Take all the Jews out of the ghetto. And if they would find somebody hiding, they used to kill.
And did you know where they were taking
We
Jews?
thought that they're going to take us to work. We didn't know they're going to put us in a guest unit.
And nobody knew.
No.
And did people know and you said, no, it's impossible, but nobody really knew that?
Because they told us that they're going to put us in a concentration camp to work. They didn't tell us they're going to put us in the guest unit. Nobody knew.
So you said for 4 days you hid, and then you decided you couldn't hide anymore?
If you would hide, they would kill you. The 4th day was the last day.
Uh-huh.
So we couldn't hide.
You see, up until then, they sort of voluntarily went into the train wagons, and then they kept wanting more and more, and then they started looking, and they didn't want anyone to hide.
But they used to yell and scream, and they used to tell everybody to come out, otherwise they'll shoot.
But you didn't come out.
Not till the 4th day.
So you took a chance, really.
The 3 days we were hiding, we took a chance, but the 4th day it was impossible.
Because it was already very few Jews, and they were going to start searching, and if they'd find you, they'd kill you right there.
So we decided to go out.
The train station was 7.5 miles from the ghetto. Because there was snow on the ground, 400 sleds were commandeered from the surrounding towns to take the Jews from the Prizhina ghetto to the train station. 6 people were put on each sleigh. This went on for 4 days. And here you see how the Jews were being forced onto the cattle cars. This could have been the car that transported my mother and her family and 10,000 Jews from Prizhina to Auschwitz. There were no seats. Perhaps 30 people could sit or stand comfortably in the car on the floor. The Nazis put between 120 and 150 people in each car. You could only stand. There was no food, no water, and nowhere to go to the bathroom. The train trip to Auschwitz took 3 days. And here you see to Auschwitz. When the war first began, after Auschwitz was built, some of the Jews who survived the cattle car trip entered Auschwitz at this sign. And now I'm sure that all of you know here, Arbeit macht frei. Work will set you free. As the war progressed, there were more and more Jews who were transported to Auschwitz, and Birkenau was built, which became a subcamp of Auschwitz and a crematorium, an extermination camp. Here we are, David and I participated in the March of the Living last year, and this is where we were. And here you see that we're walking in, and we're putting markers down on the train tracks with the names of our families. And when we were there in 2024 as a delegation of the March of the Living, I stood on these railroad tracks where my mother must have gotten out of the cattle car. My husband and I placed markers naming our relatives who were prisoners of World War II. My mother was 20 years old. Our oldest grandchildren are 20 years old, Yael and Gavi. I can't even begin to imagine our grandchildren going through this horror as my mother did and survived. And here are the markers that we put down. When my mother got to Auschwitz, this is what happened.
And so, after the train trip, where did you end up?
They took us down, and they used to, with men here, or women here, or men here, or women there. So I went with my mother, or my sister, or my brother. So I saw my younger brother, Yudol. He was crying.
Uh-huh.
And then my mother went over to one of the Germans, and she told him that I'm still young, I could work. So they took me out from the line to go to the gas chamber, and they put me in the line to work. And that's all, and since then I never saw another. But then when we were in the concentration camp, I saw one day my father and my two brothers. On the second day...
Your father asked you if your mother's still alive?
Yeah, my father asked me if my mother's still alive. I said no. Then the second day, my slave and my brother gave me cattle with food. And then the next day, I gave him back the cattle. And then after that, I never saw them again. But I used to see Maishi. He used to work in a bakery. So he used to bring me bread.
And this was in Auschwitz?
Yeah. Then he used to bring me cigarettes, not to smoke, but to trade in. So I used to tell him I don't want it because I'm not going to go and trade in for food. But I took the bread. I don't know, salami or what. I don't know.
And so what was, when you first came to the concentration camp and you were all in line to go to the gas chamber, and you knew that, I mean, you knew...
That's why my mother went over and told them that I'm still young.
How did you know that you're going to get killed, that they're going to kill you?
Because everybody was saying that they taken to the gas chamber.
Oh, there was a rumor going around.
That's right.
So you were put into the other line, and then what happened to you? I mean, what, you had your head shaved, or you...
Oh, yeah, they took everything down, and they put the numbers, and they shaved, and they gave us their clothes, and they put us in the bunkers and the rooms over there. And then every morning we had to go out and stay in line, and they used to call the numbers. And at night they used to give us one bread. They used to cut and
But before that, when you had your own clothes, you had in your clothes you had sewn in a little money or jewelry.
Everything, but
when you came there, they took all the clothes away.
That's right. They took everything away. And they gave us their clothes. They used to tell us, you put your clothes over here in one bundle.
Did they tell you we're going to go to a shower? I mean, before, you weren't there.
No.
So you had So you had, your head was shaved and you had their clothes on, and then it was a big a room with lots of beds and like bunk beds. I mean, everybody.
Yeah, upstairs and downstairs.
And so that's where you slept. How many people? Do you know?
Oh, a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
But how many were in the bunks above you? 1 or 2 or 3?
No, I think just one upstairs and one downstairs.
And so you used to sleep there at night.
And then in the morning they used to wake us up and come and stay in line, and they used to call the numbers. And then we used to go and work on the fields. And for a while I was working on the fields, and then they put me in the barracks to take the shoes apart, and then put the leather here, and this sauce here, and this there.
So you got sick one day?
Yeah, so anyway, we used to be 10 people in a little table. So then I was very sick, so the girls used to hide me in the back, and they used to take my shoes. All of them worked together. And we used to have women coppers, so they used to watch us. But when she wasn't there, I was laying in the back. When she came back, they used to pull me out, and I used to sit next to them. And then the label used to bring me medicine when he found out that I was sick.
And what did you have to eat? You said that you had a piece of bread.
They used to give us for a while a little bit soup, and then at night they used to give us the loaves of bread. They used to cut in 4, and everybody used to get one.
So that was all you had? You had soup in the morning and a piece of bread at night?
Yeah, that's it. Sometimes we didn't have anything, just bread.
How about water? You had water to drink?
I don't remember. That's why a lot of people died, because they couldn't take it.
Right.
Were you constantly hungry?
Oh, sure. Listen, I think I weighed maybe 70 pounds. I was very skinny.
I was amazed to hear my mom say she met her father and her brothers occasionally somewhere in the camp. I don't know how that was possible. And how was her uncle able to know what her sickness was and what medicine he could get her and where he got the medicine? My grandmother was a hero. She was my mom's hero, and she was my hero too. My mother witnessed bravery from her mother, such courage. The idea of standing up and even asking a question could result in death, and she saved her daughter's life. This is actually the intake building where my mother went through to get her number tattooed, to have her head shaved, to take her clothes off and put on their clothes. You heard my father mention that the prisoners would sometimes sew money and jewelry into their clothes, hopefully to be able to be used later, but never to be seen again. And you heard that my mother worked in an area which actually was called Canada, where she took apart shoes, the Nazis thinking that the prisoners hid money and jewelry in their shoes just like in their clothes. 10,000 Jews were transported from the Prussian ghetto to Auschwitz. 8,000 were sent to the gas chambers immediately, where they died. 2,000 were put to work in Auschwitz. Pruzhina and Shereshev were just 2 of the towns where the Jews living there were either murdered right away or were murdered eventually in Auschwitz. 6 million Jews were murdered during the Holocaust. The Nazis kept very complete records of these prisoners who were admitted into the concentration camps. After visiting Auschwitz in 2010, I learned of Arlsen archives in Germany that had many of these prisoner records. I was told that when the Allied forces began their invasion coming closer to Auschwitz, the Nazis began destroying these records. I couldn't find any documented information about my mom, but I was sent records of her 2 uncles, my mother's brothers, Shlomi and Moshe. And these documents were filled out by the Germans, and they're a good proof that there was an Auschwitz and that my uncles were there. So here you see that this was filled out in Shloimeh or Solomon Kamenetsky. And even, there are many names that are the same all over the country. And many Jews have the same names. I know that this was my uncle because he came, he was from Shereshev. He was in the Persian ghetto. This is his couple or cupper, they misprinted it, but this was his father, and Baba or Bubble Chesnick was my grandmother. So I know that this is his record. And up here you see the number that was tattooed on his arm, 98, and the last three numbers, 844. This is a record again from Auschwitz, and this is for my uncle Moshe or Moses. Again, from Shereshev was in Persianet, Couple and Bubble were his parents. Again, I know that this was my uncle. His number, the last three numbers, 944. That meant that the two brothers were close to each other, next to each other in the line. I have a written statement, but not the actual documentation from Arlson Archives, that my grandfather, Couple Kamenetsky's number was 98945, which means that he stood in between his two sons coming into Auschwitz. Here you see my mother's number, 33771, and half of a Jewish star. So her numeration was not the same as her brothers and her father. Her intake was in a different place in Auschwitz. And this half a Jewish star was supposed to mean political prisoner, but she was Jewish. But that's what the Jews, how the Jews were marked. When we were little, young children would ask my mother, "What are those numbers on your arm?" And she said, "It's my phone number, because I don't always remember it." So that was a very nice way of handling that. From February 1943 to January 1945, my mother worked and survived in Auschwitz. January 1945, the Russian soldiers were coming closer and closer to invade the concentration camp and free the Jews. The Nazis began the death march, moving the concentration inmates to camps further away. Uh-oh. Davey. I didn't push the wrong button, but something happened. At the beginning of this, I was supposed to say I'm thanking David for his technical help because I'm going to forget to at the end of the program. So I'm thanking him right now. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. This is where Auschwitz was, and these were the paths of the death march that they sent the Jews from Auschwitz. My mother ended up in Bergen-Belsen, and she told my brother and I that she walked from Auschwitz to Bergen-Belsen. So when we got to Auschwitz in 2010, and we had a guide, I said, "Well, we'd like to go to Bergen-Belsen," thinking we could walk there. And she said, "Oh no, you can't go there." And I later found out that it's 560 miles away. So, but my mother, what she remembered was that she walked there. And in Bergen-Belsen, I'm sure you remember, is that Anne Frank was there. And towards the end of the war, that was, she died just before the camps were liberated. And here's a picture of the inmates walking out to the out of Auschwitz. And I'm just going to go back. So, and as I said, so my uncles walked from Auschwitz to Buchenwald, which was a shorter trip. And I later learned that sometimes they walked and sometimes they rode in boxcars, and walking again for the 560 miles, which is approximately the distance from San Diego to Sacramento, which takes 7.5 hours to drive, let alone to walk that distance. I learned from another person's documentary that sometimes they walked and sometimes they rode in the boxcars. And when they were walking and they were given a chance to sit and rest, they rested on the side of a grassy hill, and when they got up, the grass was gone. They had eaten the grass. So they walked without water, without food, without a place to go to the bathroom. And this was the death march out of Auschwitz. Bergen-Belsen, where my mother ended up in January of 1945 when the death marches began, was liberated by the British and American soldiers on April the 11th, 1945. There were 60,000 starving and mortally ill people who were liberated. And her brothers, as I mentioned, went to Buchenwald. Elie Wiesel was imprisoned in Buchenwald. And again, here's the... So, again, there's documentation. Here we know this took place in Buchenwald. This is where her brothers were. And again, here is Shlomi's name. And again, I know that he was from Shereshev and he was in Prushenet. They were given new numbers. And again, with the red half a Jewish star, meaning they were political prisoners, and he was Jewish. That was his designation. Here again, Buchenwald, so we know this was an intake when they came to Buchenwald, and this is Mesha or Moses, and his number is 118528. So he and his brother were not standing next to each other when they did the march from Auschwitz to Buchenwald. Oh, and just for you to remember, all these forms from that I've shown you were in German. So they were filled out by the Nazis. Here is a death certificate of sorts. You can see that it's filled out in English. So this was filled out by the Americans or the British, whoever came in, and it says that my uncle Moshe, and I know that it's him because this is the same number that was on the other certificate, and he is buried. They were liberated. This was April the 25th, 1945. That was just before they were liberated. I don't have any information about my other uncle from there. So I don't know how they got the information, what records were kept and when. There were 1,000 Jews liquidated from my mother's town of Shereshev. 42 survived, 5 were women. My mother was one of those 5 women and one of those 42 survivors. After the war was over, different agencies began documenting the names of the survivors and where they had family and they hoped to go. My mother put her name on a list to come to America, where her father's brother, Lou Kaminsky, his name was modified when he came to the United States, was a kosher butcher in the Bronx, New York. And while so here, registration, and you see it's through the Swiss Red Cross, and it is after she was liberated from Bergen-Belsen, she went to a DP camp, a displaced persons camp, called Feldafing, so Camp Feldafing. And you see her name, Sima Kaminetska, her birth date, she was in Shereshev, but now her nationality is stateless. She has nowhere back to go. There was nobody left in Shereshev for her to go. And that she was in Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen and her number. Now she was liberated in April of 1945. This was filled out in September of 1945. So from April to September was the time, and you can see that her cheeks have filled out a little bit. They were given food and they were given new clothing when they came to Feldafing. So after the war, different agencies documented, and I still don't know how she went to Feldafing versus someplace that was closer, because Bergen-Belsen is in the northwest part of Germany, and Feldafing is close to Munich, which is in the very southern part of Germany. Oh, and here is, oh, I'm sorry. So here is, and this was filled out, and where did she want to go? To label Kamenetsky in New York, USA. So this was the information that they put out in documents that were sent to America and Israel of survivors that wanted to go to these various places. And here, these pictures are amazing to me, because here there's a smile on her face, and these are, I think, people from Pruzhina that she was with, sitting on a hillside trying to get their life back to some sort of normalcy. And here you see they're wearing heavy coats, so this was taken in the winter time. Here she's marching, and there's snow on the ground, and again on the hillside. Just several months ago, I found this picture. I am on the Facebook page of the families of Feldafing survivors. And I'm looking at this picture, and all of a sudden, I see my mother's face smiling at me. I did not have this picture before. This picture was taken by it came from the Holocaust Museum of, the United States Holocaust Museum. And this is a memorial. All these people are from Pruzhina. There were 923 survivors from Pruzhina, and 93 ended up in Camp and Feldafing. And in this picture are 53 of those 93. And this is in Yiddish, the Hebrew letters, of course, and it is a memorial to the Jews who were murdered from Pruzhina, that, remember, had 10,000 people that were liquidated there. And so this was a memorial that was set up in Camp Feldafing. This memorial no longer exists, I was told, but it was there, and she was part of it. And as a genealogist, I never stopped looking for more information. And this is what I found, and I was just flabbergasted. I couldn't believe that there she was, looking so happy. There were 10,000 Jews who were deported from the Pruzhina ghetto to Auschwitz. 8,000 were immediately gassed and cremated, my grandmother, aunt, and uncle and grandfather among those. 2,000 were put to slave labor in Auschwitz. As I said, 923 survived. 92 were in Camp Feldafing, and this picture had 53. Cousins in New York found my mother's name on a list and contacted her Uncle Lou Kominsky, who was able to sponsor my mother on the first boat of survivors out of Europe, May 1946, which was called the Marin Flasher, out of Bremen, Germany. And she landed in New York 11 days later, and she said she was sick the entire time, where she was met by her loving family. She stayed in New York for 2 years, where she was able to get a job in the sweatshops sewing clothing. Uncle Lou's daughter, Sylvia, told me that after a day's work, my mother would go to her Uncle Lou's butcher shop, take him by the hand as they walked to buy ice cream. She never had ice cream in her home in Shereshev, and she loved it. As we were growing up, we always had Neapolitan ice cream in the freezer. And when I asked my brother, do you remember that? He said, when we finished it, the next day there was another container of ice cream in the freezer ready for us to eat. She came to Los Angeles after spending 2 years in New York, and she went on a blind date with my father, Leonard Meschel, August 1948. They were married November 1948. My mother was 26 years old, and my father was 30. And here's a picture at their wedding, and her cousins provided her with everything, with all the clothing and with the wedding itself. And I wonder if you see anything not unusual, but something that's covered up in this picture. Her number, yes. So her relatives made sure she had long white gloves so that her number would not provide any sadness to that day. Out of despair and loss, my mother found joy and hope in the beginning of her new family, starting with me and my brother. And this is a picture from 1953. And my mother is wearing her wedding dress in this picture. And I don't know whether you can see, but I think that the photographer sort of erased her number from this picture. As Ehud mentioned, our family lived in Oxnard, California, and there was an article in the Oxnard Press Courier when my mother became a citizen. She was so proud. And I think that she was the only Holocaust survivor in Oxnard at the time. We had 60,000 people there. And here is her citizenship certificate. And her family continued to grow with grandchildren and great-grandchildren. When our daughter, Alicia, was born, I asked her what she wanted to be called, thinking she would say Bubby, which is the Yiddish for grandmother. She said, "I want to be called Grandma because I'm an American." And here's a picture of our family just a couple of years ago, and I think a lot of you know who they are, but here's our daughter Alicia and Rabbi Ehud and their children Davi and Yael and Eitan. And this is our daughter Shana and her husband Aaron. And here's our son Ben, whose birthday it is today. He's 45 years old. And his wife Alana and their two boys, Evan and Judah. Shana, her youngest grandchild, was 7 years old, and she bounded into the room.
So, did we cover it?
Yeah, everything. And now we have 2 children.
How long have you been married?
With 3 darling grandchildren, plus Shayna, my darling grandchild.
Shane,
Yeah.
you want to go sit on Grandma Simmy's lap for a minute? You can be in the video too.
My little Shayna.
You want to say something to Grandma Simmy? What do you want to say to her?
I love you, I love you, I love you.
I love you, I love you, I love you.
You want to say that back?
You're my darling granddaughter.
You're my darling granddaughter.
You're the Grandma Simmy's your granddaughter? No.
You're my
So,
girl.
did we cover it, do you think?
And my mother was able to meet her great-grandchildren, Yael and Gabi, and Shayna's all grown up in this picture. She was so happy to have all of the family around her. Debbie, you're making me cry. And my mom died 2 years later in 2008, so this was in 2006. My parents came to America with no physical belongings from their past life. And so I've been creating heirlooms, and as Ehud said, I'm crafty. And I want to share with you, this one first. So I don't know how many of you can actually, okay. You hold the mic off. Okay, wait a minute. Okay, yes. I created this family tree, and I thought that the house that's in the middle, to me, was sort of a typical European home without anything fancy. And so David and our names are there. All the other relatives that I was able to find names for are up here, and then our children are down here. So this is an heirloom that I have created for our family. I belong to a stitchers group, as Ehud mentioned, the Pomegranate Guild of Judaic Needlework, and this quilt was made by members of our chapter during COVID, actually, when we couldn't get together, and it was coming up to Yom HaShoah. And I suggested that we pick a butterfly from the book. I never saw another butterfly from the children who were in Theresienstadt. And and we each did squares, and we put the names of those who had perished and of those who survived. So I think that this is an appropriate piece to hang up here and show you. And I have one more. I belonged to a quilt guild for a number of years, and one of the challenges was to make something about my hero. And it's hard to tell what this is, but my mother used to wear sundresses, sleeveless. And so this is actually a picture of her standing like this. Her arm is down here, and her number is there. So she was my hero. So this was something that I created with that. Again, I want to thank David for all his tech support, always, always, always. And if you have questions or comments, I would love to answer any questions that you might have. Oh.
Tremendous, thank you. And so
Thank
we're going to pass the mic around because people are watching online so they can hear your question.
Thank you, Bonnie. I didn't know a lot of this, and it was really amazing. Not a question, but what I found pretty amazing is that your mom was 18 when she got to the concentration camp, correct?
She was
when she was taken from her neighborhood.
Well, when she was when they had to liquidate
Right.
Cheryshev, yes.
And then you conducted those interviews with her when she was 68.
Right.
It's amazing that she remembered things from 50 years ago, and I mean they were right on, and I find that pretty amazing. And the interview you did with her, it was really wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you. I want to tell you that my brother and I always knew the story, and I was trying to think why? How did we know the story? And I think that she must have shared her story with the relatives who we ended up meeting here. And it was always the same. Gail, those were exact, it didn't vary. It didn't expand, it didn't contract. She always had the same memories. So you're right that at 68, they were still very clear, and she forgot a little bit here and there, but that was amazing. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. It was a beautiful story. Two questions. Oh, two questions. One is, how did she know her uncle was in New York after, going through so much challenging?
That's a very good question. So her uncle was her father's brother, and before things got so bad, she told us that her mother wrote to Lou, so her father's brother, asked if the family could come to New York. Sadly, he said, "I don't have a place for you." And so they didn't come. So she always knew that he was a kosher butcher in the Bronx. And part of that, she mentions Label, who is her mother's brother. So Lou and Label, but Label lived in Pruzhnev. Label's first wife died of cancer. Her brother was in the army in the United States. And he was able to, and after the war, he came back and he said, his uncle Label and his brother-in-law Label and my mother wanted to come to the United States. So that was part of the connection also. So when the relatives saw my mother's name on the list, and I looked for that list, the lists are supposed to be available, but I couldn't find it. My mother's name was on that list. So of the survivors, it's amazing to me that a relative saw her name, in fact. And that was from the form that she filled out. There was one form, and she said she wanted to go to Label Kamyanetsky in New York. So that information got on that list. And that was the connection. I mean, it's amazing. Yes.
Incredible. The other question is, you said she was in New York for 2 years and then came to California. What prompted her? Did she go with
She
family?
couldn't make a match in New York. So the Los Angeles family said, come, we've got lots of boys here. Come to New York.
So there was family here.
It was family, yes. And that was part of the family that made the wedding for her as well. And two friends in her family and in my father's family said, I got a girl for you, and they said, I got a boy for you, and they had a blind date. So
Okay.
that was the connection.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. When did you do the interview? What year?
1990.
Okay, so I was an interviewer for the Shoah Foundation, and I did your mother's interview for the Shoah. And I shared with Rabbi when I came in, the first thing when I walked in, she looked at me and she said, do you know my daughter? No, I don't know your daughter. But she proceeded to tell me who her daughter was, and she was delightful. And she had a strength. I remember that.
I remember finding out that you were the one that interviewed her for the show on. We have that interview because didn't your sister belong to Beth Kodesh, and which became Shomrei Torah? Ah, okay. So that was the connection. Thank you. That was yes. And you asked different things in that Shoah interview than I asked. And I have to be honest with you, and I've said this, I didn't ask enough questions. I didn't know other things to ask. I thought I was asking everything. And as I have been putting this together, I realized I didn't ask her, how did you know where you found your brother? I mean, how did he know? And where did you come back here? They didn't have watches, come back here at 3 o'clock and we'll trade. It's amazing to me, so.
Anyone else?
Actually, kind of a regret. Frank's parents were in concentration camps and met on a train, actually, on the way to the DP camp. And he said he was going to marry her, and he did. But at one point, when my kids were young, they lived in West LA, we lived in the Valley. His mom had asked me to write her story, and the logistics of it, I never did it, and I kind of regret it.
Yeah, I felt very blessed when Alicia asked 2 years ago for me to make this presentation about my mom. I had never spoken about her, and I'd never put anything together. And I had this interview that I did with her, and so David and I started working on how to make this presentation. And I was so grateful that we interviewed all 4 of our parents, and we have that information, and it was certainly one of the best things. And we're waiting for our children to want to interview us, by the way. Or we'll just do it ourselves. I don't know. Cameras, you have all kinds of things you're able to do. Thank you. Oh, yes.
No, Bonnie, thank you. It was very heartwarming, too. My grandfather came from Pinsk, and my grandmother came from Minsk. So you gave me a real good geography lesson here, because they always thought that they were from Russia. But they're really not from Russia, but they were here before. They were here in the early 1900s. So I'm wondering if it was more comforting for them to say they were from Russia than to say that they would have been in that area.
Right.
So I thank you for that geography lesson. It's unsettling to me, but I hope to learn some more from it. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And I also want to tell you that when I was first researching this, it was amazing to me. I mean, not to be political now, but Russia's always been an aggressor. So they came in. I mean, my mother said first the Russians came in and they took away all our food. And that was before they were part of the Allied group. And they came forward, but then they retreated as the Nazis came further east in Poland. So it is amazing to see the map. And that we needed special visas to get into Belarus and a special guide, and it was just very interesting to be able to go back and see where we went to Pinsk also to see Pinsk and Cheryshev, which has no Jews in it now. Pinsk does, and it's grown exponentially. But there's a Jewish synagogue that's functioning in Pinsk and all kinds of other things. So it's amazing. If there are no other questions, thank you for coming. Thank you very, very much.
Huge thank you to Bonnie for presenting for us. And as sadly, as we know, every year there are fewer and fewer survivors, and you've picked up the mantle of the children of the second generation to continue the story, and we're going to keep listening to it, and we'll pass it on to the next generation. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.